Hello. The past week has been troubling for anyone who has been keeping abreast with international affairs. Wars seem to be breaking out every other week. At first, there was the war between Ukraine and Russia. And then there was the short conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And then, most recently, another war between Hamas and Israel. I've been thinking about how we in such privileged societies relate to atrocities which are committed abroad, which we get wind of, but which we can do nothing about. It is obviously something that we ought to be concerned about. Matters of life and death, matters of really fundamental injustice, of a simple right to live, not even a right to live well, but a very basic right to live. And so I think for me, my way of relating to these atrocities, to these injustices which stir something in me, which make me feel like I should do something, is perhaps to do what I can through my chosen art form, which is poetry. I think we all know that war poetry tends to be written, obviously during or after war. But something quite strange for me that I've noticed is how little poetry I've seen these past few months about war. Admittedly, we live in Singapore and it is hard to expect, I guess, Singaporean writers to write about war that isn't happening here. But it's strange that even though we are constantly bombarded with news of war elsewhere, none of that really factors into our writing. Or maybe I'm just looking at the wrong places. Maybe I'm just more attuned or interested, I guess, in the aesthetic kinds of literature that's produced. Literature for literature's sake, art for art's sake. But I do think there is a place still for social poetry or social art. I think at heart I am still an activist of sorts, and I like to be a social commentator. And what sets literature apart from the other forms of art is its ability to speak very plainly about truth. Music and visual arts, they are different ways of expressing truths, and the truths that they can express are generally more vague, generally more abstract. But with poetry, with words, not just poetry, in fact prose or essays, with words basically we can express what we truly mean, I think, and reach as wide an audience as possible. I mean, that is why the Gutenberg Press has been so influential and why it is credited with having, generated such radical social change. So I think there is a place for social poetry, and I really want for there to be more of that, at least in our culture. Otherwise, I think it is kind of problematic how we consume so much, of so much media of these events, these incidents, but really do nothing to act on them or process them in the way which, writing or reading can do for us. Anyway, so preamble aside, I have chosen two poems to read today. One is a Chinese poem by the local poet Hao Yang, and the other is a pretty well-known poem by W.H. Auden. So I'll read the Auden first. The Unknown Citizen. To JS/07M378, this marble monument is erected by the state. He was found by the Bureau of Statistics to be one against whom there was no official complaint, and all the reports on his conduct agree that, in the modern sense of an old-fashioned word, he was a saint. For in everything he did he served the greater community. Except for the war, till the day he retired, he worked in a factory and never got fired, but satisfied his employers, Fudge Motors Inc. Yet he wasn't a scab or odd in his views, for his union reports that he paid his dues. Our report on his union shows it was sound, and our social psychology workers found that he was popular with his mates and liked a drink. The press are convinced that he bought a paper every day, and that his reactions to advertisements were normal in every way. Policies taken out in his name prove that he was fully insured, and his health card shows he was once in hospital but left it cured. Both Producers Research and High Grade Living declare he was fully sensible to the advantages of the installment plan and had everything necessary to the modern man: a phonograph, a radio, a car, and a Frigidaire. Our researchers into public opinion are content that he held the proper opinions for the time of year. When there was peace, he was for peace. When there was war, he went. He was married and added 5 children to the population, which our eugenist says was the right number for a parent of his generation. And our teachers report that he never interfered with their education. Was he free? Was he happy? The question is absurd. Had anything been wrong, we should certainly have heard. So this poem isn't overtly about war, but it is very much about individuals being treated as statistics, which we are seeing right now in reportage about the war between Hamas and Israel, for example. The tallying of deaths on both sides as if it's a competition. And, the numbers of refugees that are being displaced right now in Gaza. This poem does, question the states and other institutions' relationship to the individual. We live in a time of mass politics. Everything is messing with mass culture, mass consumption, mass politics. In this kind of culture, in this kind of world, in this kind of political landscape, what is then the status that's accorded to the individual? Is he just an abacus bead, for example? So the next poem I would like to read is Somewhere There Is a War Thinking of Me. Somewhere there is a war thinking of me. Always whenever the hour is quietest, somewhere there is a war thinking of me. And I would strive to forget the West Bank's story. Once upon countless years, days and nights, it made me weep elegies. When, in 2004, a life and another life's mutual destruction had become a consummate performance on both sides, nobody told me that after the deaths and explosions, who would be happier? Whose soul would enter heaven? Rest now, warriors and demons, let the West Bank be mired in the firing of blood and limbs, continuing without end, endlessly replaying the aim and shot of a raw-chopped corpse. Really? Must hatred be this violent, this cruel, really? Amidst the deaths you proclaim equality. How to bury my shattered face, how to lock my eyes of wear and despair, my ears forever, never to hear a war somewhere thinking of me. Now I'll read the Chinese original version. 有一个战争在远方想我，总是寂寞的时候，远方有一个战争在想我，而我极力去忘记西岸的故事。曾经多少岁月，多少日夜，使我涕泪哀歌。当2004年，生命与生命之同归于尽，已经成为双方的最佳演出。没有人告诉我，死亡爆炸以后，谁比较快乐，谁的灵魂进入天堂。安息吧，烈士和魔鬼，让西岸在地上血肉纷飞，继续不断重播目标杀机的鲜血碎尸。真的吗？仇恨必须如此凶猛残酷？真的，在死亡中你们宣告平等。怎样埋葬我心碎的脸，怎样锁闭我过度绝望疲倦的眼睛，耳朵以致永远不再听见一个战争在远方想我。后记2004年4月25日凌晨，因西岸常作不眠，知道有一个战争在远方想我。Postscript 2004, 25th of April, early morning. I could not sleep because of the West Bank, knowing that there is a war somewhere far away that is thinking of me. Hope you enjoyed listening to me read these two poems, and more importantly, they helped you to process and express your thoughts and feelings about the events that, we've been witnessing these past few days and weeks. Ultimately, what poetry can do for us is help us approach the other as a fellow human being, in order to forge common understanding and a true sense of fraternity, which I don't think that, just simply consuming videos and images of human suffering abroad does for us. At this point, I just like to say that I hope nuance does prevail or stay intact throughout these wars, that we don't reduce them to black or white and see civilian lives on both sides as numbers, or as worthy on one side and unworthy on the other side. Ultimately, these are still innocent human lives, and I just pray, for peace and for the right people to be elected to power, at least where democracy works. So that's all from me. Thank you and goodbye.